Hey, everybody, this is Josh, Canadian immigration lawyer and CEO at Visto.ai for another episode of the Canadian Immigration Pros podcast. I'm here with Mikael Charette. Mikael, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure, Josh. Happy to be with you.
Yes, very excited. For those listening after the fact, today is October 24th, 2024. I'm mentioning this because just a few hours ago, the 2025 immigration levels plan was announced. We very hectically studied it up and down, and now we have even more to talk about than we initially did. But before we jump into that, Mikael, can you just tell everybody a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. I've been an immigration lawyer for about 20 years now, and I moved to Asia in 2004, 2005, fall into the big marmite, the big soup of Quebec investor program, and I run a law firm in Beijing as a managing partner all the way to 2016. And since 2016, I've been operating a practice on my own, a company called Frontier Immigrations, and we specialize in business immigration. And I think for business immigration to Canada, today is a bit of a sad day, like we'll discuss a bit later, but that's what I specialize in. I've been working in other jurisdictions with partners around the world, Europe, the US with their EB-5 programs, as well as other countries that have immigration days for business people and business people that want to move their families or their businesses.
Awesome. So my first question is this. Let's pretend like the levels plan did not get announced yet, right?
Yes.
There's been so much change, even still in the last year or so with Canadian immigration. The last few years too, right? Because Quebec, you mentioned the Quebec investor program, that closed for a little, opened, then they capped SUV, stuff like that.
Yeah.
In general, Mikael, like again, let's say we were talking yesterday.
Yeah.
How would you describe the general Canadian immigration landscape for business people or entrepreneurs?
It's almost looked like we forgot to get business people, or at least a sense of policy that allow business people to come to Canada. In the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen in Canada a reductions of business stream programs for business people. Quebec was the leader for so many years with their investor program, which was passive. A couple other provinces have been very successful at their PNP program across the board. We can think about New Brunswick, we can think about Saskatchewan, Manitoba, even British Columbia. They all had like their own level of success through their PNP program and entrepreneurial business over the years. But those programs kind of got bad press, and it's almost like either consciously or unconsciously, the policymaker kind of reduced those numbers over time. And it's sad because the beauty of the immigration systems in Canada is about creating a little bit of everybody. I always say, you need a little bit of everything in order to make the right balance in a society. And if we don't have stream for business people, it becomes very difficult for them to immigrate to Canada. And we're limiting ourselves in terms of FDI, foreign direct investment that could come through that. There is few, but we should have a bigger portion of our program, in my view, obviously, that allow those business people to come to Canada to innovate. And I always say, immigration is all about second generation. And if we want to be a society that innovate, that create growth, economic growth, yes, we need to address, work shortage in certain area. Yes, we need to help people that are at war and needs a refuge, and Canada should continue to do that. Yes, families should be allowed to get their members to Canada in order to live together. But we also need business people. And let's face it, the Bank of Canada came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they're talking about the productivity problems in Canada. And 2 weeks ago, The Economist was writing like a full 3-page about Canadian economy falling behind compared to the US. We're comparing ourselves to like small states in US in terms of economic growth. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for this. There's no reason for this. We have like the capacity to attract the best around the world, and that attractivity is likely losing its edge based on the conversation I'm having around the world with business people.
Right. Yeah. It's so sad, especially these days. As you mentioned, our economy is just not doing well. And what better way to kind of give it a boost, create more jobs,
Yeah.
improve GDP, all that kind of stuff than bringing in entrepreneurs. I think maybe one of the reasons why, and I'm about to ask you why you think it's been this way. I think one of the reasons is that because a lot of the programs haven't done that well because the vetting hasn't been done that well. And
Mhm.
many of the entrepreneurial programs have been taken advantage of, especially the SUV. But
Yep.
why do you think that the government hasn't spent more time or energy or resources building and supporting proper entrepreneurial programs?
Like you said, there's limit success that been witnessed in some of those programs, and it's a reality. But we underlooked, in my view, what the policymakers are not looking at the bigger pictures very often. If you bring business people, they're gonna create jobs. They're gonna create. We're kind of shy about it. It's to me, it's we're lacking ambitions, which is a bit Canadians,
Hmm.
right? In itself,
Yeah.
the Americans, like let's compare, right? Like it's easier if we compare. Like the EB5 in US, it was $500,000 US. It's now $850,000 US. They targeted like economic zone that were already not doing so well or having higher unemployment rates across the territory. They had a minimum 10 job per investors done. We could do the same thing in Canada. We could have done the same thing years ago. And we don't have this ambition of saying, let's bring the best entrepreneurs from around the world. And we need this ambition. We need to be okay to say, not the mom and pop shop. Like all the program, when I look at them, like the requirement is so low. I say, bring it to 1 million. Don't require them to speak English or French. They're going to learn. They're going to learn. They're business people. They're going to get here and they're going to learn. They're going to find a way. We don't even need to give them free class. The business people are ambitious people. And as I said earlier, it's about the second generations. Look at
Mm.
the success in Quebec of the Vietnamese community. Amazing, amazing. 40 years after the people that came, we have very good success of business entrepreneurs that did very well over the years. Their kids are great contributor to the society. And I think we need to have the ambitions of saying we need more business people and they will have a positive impact on our economy. This narrative, I don't hear. I don't hear that in the
Yeah.
media. A lot of the things that I heard, especially for the Quebec immigrant, the Quebec investor program over the years, one of the critics was like, oh, well, they- they're, they're business people and maybe they're did their money a certain way. And I always fight this idea because we all know that China was a big market for the Quebec investor program. And during those years, those people were just part of a big economy that was growing extremely fast. They were making money with real estate, just like people are doing in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, because the economy was growing at a certain pace. The real estate market was growing at a certain pace. A lot of them they did well with their own businesses. And they were looking at Canada to come, settle, and have a quiet life. And those people, they spend money, right? And we have a
Yeah.
we have HST in Canada that if people are spending money in Canada, it's good for economy and it's good for revenues of the government as well. So that big pictures that we need spender, we need people that will contribute to the economy. And if we had the ambitions of saying, if you do a business, you're going to create 10 jobs. If you want to come to Canada and do business, you need to commit to create jobs. And I
Right.
feel that, and we can talk about it a bit later, but we don't have the tools to remove people. And we should be okay of saying, if you don't fulfill your requirements, it's going to be conditional. We don't have a conditional PR in Canada. We don't have that systems. We don't have that removal capacity. We did the work
Mm.
permit that became the PR in most PNP that been kind of transformed over the years, the last 10 years, I would say. But again, we could have a conditional PR. And are we willing to do that as
Yeah.
a society? Maybe that's the right questions. And I don't have the answer for that. But I think we should. I think we should. We should not be scared of that. We should look for result. We should look for economic impact, job creations. And we should be asking for that from the applicant.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I agree with everything you said. It's like, are we being too Canadian, ironically, in this situation, right? And
Yeah.
like you said, we need spenders, we need job creators. What does it matter if they made a whole bunch of money in real estate if it means that they're willing to invest in and, start or buy a business here and
Yep.
employ 5, 10, 20 other people in the country,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic to me. And it really, the other thing too that baffles me is like, it's not rocket science, right? Like you said, Quebec has done it very well. Other countries have done it very well. The eligibility criteria do not have to be that fancy, right?
Mhm.
You're going to start or buy a business. You have to be worth this much. You have to invest that much. And I'm really interested in what you said, which is maybe the entrepreneurial PNPs are actually thinking too small, because
Yes.
a lot of them require, a net worth of like 3, 4, 500K and an
Yep.
investment of like 150,
Yep.
250K. Maybe that's attracting the quote unquote wrong people. And we got to go a little bit bigger
Yep.
and attract the best, right?
Yeah.
I haven't really heard anybody say that. And I found that very interesting. Now, one thing that we heard today is they're actually, not only are they not thinking along the lines that you and I are, they're thinking in the opposite, because the
I know.
levels plan came out this morning.
Yep.
And I'm just going to divert my eyes here because last year's levels plan, 2024, they had budgeted or targeted 5,000 people through the federal business programs, which I still think is too small of a number. This year, not only did they reduce the target from 5,000 to 2,000, but the year after, in 2026, they're bringing the target down to 1,000. So what do you make of this, Mikael? Like, I think it's kind of crazy. Like
The
obviously
lack
we're
of
both on the
ambition.
same team here.
Yep.
How are they going in the opposite direction?
It's a mystery to me. It's a mystery to me. We would have the luxury of having a federal investor program that could be fantastic, right? And they did a few years ago, but they made it they made it with so many requirements, such a high level of English speaking, such a high level of investment. What I say is that if you want to do it successfully, be flexible. If at $2 million investment doesn't work, let's bring it down to 1.5 million or $1 million. We have VCs in Toronto here that could benefit from direct investment from those investors. Why we're going in the opposite directions? Right now it's just easy for policymaker to cut there because we don't have a program. It's hard to create a program that works. We would need to do new regulations, creating everything, but we should have this ambition. We should totally have these ambitions. If you want to go from 500,000 applicant that you will accept down to 365 or 300,000 X number that they came up with today, they need to cut somewhere, and they cannot cut in other programs. Like it's too difficult. So they decided to cut on this, but it's, to me, a mistake. The Canadian economy could benefit so much from having a strong investor program. And I think we could have the bar very high and tell people, if you want to come do business here and you want to immigrate and bring your family with your business, this is the bar and this is the price. And then if we don't have any applicant, then we can go down the bar, but we should try it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, I actually think if we look back over the last like 10-ish years, I actually think IRCC has had a pretty good track record of creating programs.
Yeah.
The problem that I've seen
I
is
heard you.
maintaining them and
Yeah.
and processing them properly, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Global's Talent Stream, I actually think is still a very good program. Express
Absolutely.
Entry, back in the day, world renowned, right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's very different now, but world renowned. Startup Visa at the time, world renowned, right?
Yeah.
But what's happened, right? Like they don't. There's not much transparency. They don't do back checking well. They I don't know, right?
So
The processing's a bit of a black box, right?
yeah.
But like on paper, those are great programs. In practice, not so much.
Yeah. My theory on this, Josh, is we stopped selecting, we started to react. And we got into COVID era, let's call it this way, the 2020 to 2022, and we went into that perfect storm. So we increased the amount of applicants we were taking. We had civil servant, the people that process the cases, right, that print those visas, that went home. In some cases, we were still paper-based, right? In 2020, I remember my Quebec investor cases that I was sending to federal, we were sending it paper, right? And those paper got sent to Sydney, Nova Scotia, stayed in the factory or the warehouse for a long time without people touching it because they were worried that they would be contaminated or somehow. And then they created a temporary file number systems to just stick numbers and not lose the paper. And we're changing that, right? Like the new online system is working better and better, and we're seeing improvement happening. But that perfect storm where we slow down processing of those applications, the fact that we try to get more people than we were doing previously without necessarily having the resources. Understanding the federal government machine is very important here. If you tell IRCC, we will do that. Well, for the civil servant or the deputy minister, what he's thinking is, okay, what's my envelope? How much is my budget? How many head do I have to do that? And that's it. That's how it works. Like, so you can't hope to increase by the amount of increase that we went through between 2028 and 2023, let's say, that curve of taking more people without the resources. And again, this has been addressed as of today, but there was a 2 or 3 years gap where it was not addressed. And the backlog that we created during that time, the mess that we created during that time, and the political focus, and that's not the civil servant, that's not IRCC, that's a political willingness to say, we will address the war that is happening in the world right now. Special program for Ukraine, special program for Afghanistan, special program for Syria. What happened when a politician comes out, do a press conference and says, okay, we're going to take 40,000 Afghan people. Deputy minister has to move 100 people to take care of that. He needs to literally fly 10 people to the area. Or for Ukraine, I remember I was in Poland at the time when it was a few days after it was announced, and we had to deploy 120 military just to go handle the fingerprinting, right? The biometric, in order to take the applications. We process 120,000 visa for Ukraine. It takes people to do that. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes resources. While those people are processing the Ukrainian people that were really in need, let's face it, they're not processing the other cases, right? It's just a certain amount of people that are moved around. They hire more people, and we're seeing the impact in 2024. It's really happening. I mean, I've seen cases, but those cases were in the machine since 2018, 2019, 2020.
Jeez.
They're getting a result today. So I know that they were not touched for all those years. And if you ask for the ATIP related to those cases, you see that there's huge gap where people just didn't touch those cases. And that was linked to what we've seen today, like the quota, the Quebec versus federal, and we can get into that if you're interested. But there was Quebec didn't talk to the federal for a little while, and they were accepting, they were issuing more CSQ than they were willing to admit people. So there was a disparity in the numbers, and that created the perfect storm again that we saw in the Quebec Investor Program backlog. But it's very important to remember that this is how it works. This is how the machine works behind. You need resources to address an increase of visas issuance, because the integrity of the system is very important. We cannot just say yes to everyone. There's a selection that needs to happen. And I think we've been reacting, or the machine been reacting more than selecting. And the same thing apply a little bit to the business people. We, instead of wanting to select properly with requirements, we just said to the players in the VC and angels and incubators to handle it. And that might have created the problems we see today. So having clear requirements and clear objectives in the business creations is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say for everything, right? We saw the same thing for study permits. They said,
Yep.
"Hey, schools, agents, you handle it," and look what happened there, right?
Yep.
Exact same thing.
Yeah.
Now, so you're talking about selections, Mikael. So how do
Yeah.
we balance all this? Like, how should the Canadian government or IRCC, or I guess it's a combination, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
politicians and the government,
Yeah.
well, and Immigration Canada, kind of in tandem.
Yeah.
How do we get back to, the glory days? How do we find and select and process the best and brightest?
Well, I think we need to recognize that immigration is now a priority for government, that budget needs to be allocated to helping IRCC to achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve. That's number one. I think we need to be ambitious about our immigration policy in terms of who we want to attract, right? And that's very important. Not just taking people because of a certain circumstances. We need to stop doing this. And then we need to address the elephant in the room, which is and it's being addressed right now. And we'll see the result of that in the couple weeks to come. But the temporary residence drama or scandal that we're seeing right now. I call it a scandal by now. I've been saying this for 10 years. We're letting people in on temporary status without necessarily having a path for them towards a PR. And we've been blamed by the UN for this a few months ago because it's inhuman to let people work here for 3 years, 6 years, and at the end, they don't even have a path. Or worse, they're in the machine, they're hoping, right? This hope of immigration. This is wrong. This is wrong. We need to respect her word as a society, as a country. We offer a certain requirements, and then there should be a path. And in my practice, I work a lot this way. I always try to understand, do I have a path for your family to stay here for business people? I don't want people to come on a work permit and don't have a path. It's just wrong. And we have less and less solutions. I will admit it. My practice is practically inapparent in the recent months or years because we don't have the tool. And you mentioned it, and it's going to stay this way for the next few years as the numbers are coming out. So it's very important that we're hearing some numbers about 3 million temporary residents in the country right now. Well, think about it. This is 7-8% of our populations. We're 40 million people in Canada. Mm-hmm. And let's say now we're down to 365,000. At 500,000, that's what 6 years. We could have said, we don't take anybody outside. We just manage people that are here. Let's say you say, okay, half don't want to stay. Okay, half will actually happily leave, which in my view, it's very optimistic if we're looking at the big picture this way. You have, 1.5 million. At 500,000, it's 3 years of processing people already here, already with their family, already working here, already integrated in the society. And I'm contradicting myself a little bit because obviously this is not selecting, right? Like it's just fixing a problem. But sometimes you need to fix the problems to be able to have the ambitions of doing something else. And I think this is the biggest issues right now. We need to make sure that we regularize those people because remember, our systems, and that's not I'm not pretending that this is easy to fix. By any means, there's a lot of nuance, but there's two things that is missing in our systems in order to act quickly on those temporary residents. And very few people are talking about this in the media, and it's very different than the US, for example, if you compare. Or similar. The first things, we don't know who leaves. We have no numbers on who actually leaves the country when their visa expires. And I'm talking about temporary resident visa. I'm talking about student visa. I'm talking about work permit. That's number one. How many people do you meet that you ask them on implied status, right? The famous implied status. And we cannot blame people. Mm-hmm. There's a point where people were renewing their work permit that was issued for 1 year. That was 18-month processing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you blame people? Like they would get their visa the first day and then it would take longer than the validity to get it renewed, right? Like I think this is getting fixed slowly, but we were there when the perfect storm happened. And the second thing is to make sure that the people remain productive in the society, right? If we realize this, and we don't, let's say we were about, let's say the policymaker were deciding to say, okay, we're too many temporary resident people in this country, and there's the wording that scares me like hell, but I hear it more and more. People saying like new immigrants, 10 years old, 10 years in the country, new immigrants saying there's too many immigrants in Canada now. This is scary. This never happened before in our history.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, at least, I don't remember a situation where new immigrants are really anti-immigrants like we're seeing in the country right now. And let's say the tone keep getting stronger and we say, okay, we need to remove those people or we need to figure out who's who and who is in the country. We don't even have the tools to do that. And that would be very expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have an officer in the plane leaving with 300 people in a Boeing, right? Like if you decide to send them back somewhere. So we don't have ACE like they have in the US. ICE, sorry. Like the policing of immigration doesn't exist. Doesn't exist in
Mm-hmm.
Canada. So that's a reality. If we don't want to increase polarization in our society, this is very important that this is addressed, at least discussed in the public place. I feel that we're avoiding the big questions, the big elephant in the room, and we need to encourage those people to start new business. I must admit that Quebec is doing a little bit something right in that sense. They're trying to see if there's some of those temporary people that could start their business and already speaking French, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many requirements to the business that new business program that were announced in January 1st. The CAC went 100% French. Business people, they don't necessarily need to speak French. They don't necessarily need to speak English to be successful. And because, number one, I think they're going to learn it over time because there are people that wants to succeed in life. So they don't need to speak the language at the entry. I think business people should have a waiving of languages if we want to have ambitions in terms of money invested, job creation, etc. And they will create jobs of value for the people that needs it in the economy as well. So we need those people to come here and create jobs and grow businesses that will increase our GDP, increase our economic impact. So it's a complete mistake to reduce those numbers. We need those innovators. We need those people that have the capacity to like raise it up. So seeing the number going down, it's very sad to me. I think it's wrongly addressing. And then those temporary resident problems, now that we're reducing even further, how are we going to deal with that? Right? All those students, they're not going to leave. They're not going to leave.
I mean, I think you highlighted the biggest problem. Number one, the removal stuff, totally agree. But I think everything, all these news articles, blah, 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 most of it's not even touching on the biggest problem that you alluded to, which is, listen, because there was no limitation on temporary residence for the last forever, right? There was never, until today, there was no cap on temporary residence. Well, they announced the students earlier this year, but now it's official in the levels plan.
Yeah.
We have close to 3 million temporary residents in Canada right now. And they just reduced the number of PRs per year down to 395,000. Like you said, let's take a very conservative number and say 50% of them want to stay in Canada and settle here. That's 1.5 million. A maximum of about 400,000 of them are going to get PR in the next year. What are the other million going to do if and when their permits expire? And they're still letting in 600,000 temporary residents a year. So I don't know, man. Like I've been saying this for a few months now. I've been following a few people on LinkedIn who've been saying this for years. This is going to get real ugly. What happens if in 1 year, 500,000 people lose status? Are they all going to hop on a plane and go home?
Yeah.
Are they all going to stay illegally? What are they going to do here illegally? Like I don't
And the
know.
re- and, and
How
the
do you
reason we
fix it?
need, yeah, the fix is not easy, but certainly reducing numbers are not helping. We need to have the courage to say, this is a situation that we created, and we need to have respect for those people. And it's our responsibility as a society to say, we will integrate those people to our society. And uh, if you're
So do
here
you
and your
think we
country
should
is at
lean
war, they will not want to go back. Think about the Ukrainian people. They will want to stay here, even though it's struggling. Like I meet
But what
some in
about, Mikael,
Toronto,
like
and yeah,
what about the million international students? Because the stuff that you're talking about, I totally agree. And that's
yeah,
almost like quote
yeah,
unquote easy, right? Like, yes, if you're fleeing from a war-torn country.
correct.
The majority of these temporary residents
Yeah,
are international students and
yeah,
temporary foreign workers.
yeah.
So what do we do with 1.5 million temporary residents with expiring permits? Do you think they should be enforcing removals more? Do you think they should be saying, you know what, we screwed up. Let's do another TR to PR thing, right? Remember they did it a few years ago at a much
Uh-huh.
smaller scale, right? They invited like 75,000 people through express entry in one shot. Do you
Yeah.
think they should do more along that line or more along the, hey, sorry, we screwed up.
Yeah.
500,000 of you got to leave right now? Or is it something in the middle? Or like, there's no pretty solution either
Yeah.
way, right?
Well, I'll preach from my own chapel, like we say in French. I think we should give them business opportunities. I think we should encourage those students to start businesses. We should encourage those students to innovate more coming out of our schools. No, the solutions shorten the time and bring them to society, and then active society, and have requirements on, and let's be aggressive on requirements that we fix for retaining them, giving them an opportunity to stay and be productive. I think that's the solutions. Hoping it's wishful thinking to think that they're going to leave on their own. Some will, because they will see more
Mhm.
opportunities to go back to India. I think it's wishful thinking. I think they're going to stay here and the problems will get bigger. So, and then the conversations we may want to have is that if we don't have solutions, and I kind of apologize for it, because I'm a solution oriented person. I wish I would have more solutions to the table. I would, but maybe we need to have the conversation that our social net system is not geared for this. And this is kind of the debate that policymakers are probably having right now. Is the real problem that we hear in the media is like the healthcare systems, and Legault is pretty good with this. Like, he's good in the media and he's coming out and he's knocking that nail over and over for almost a year now. Our healthcare system cannot take it anymore. Our school cannot take it anymore. We got X numbers of refugees in Quebec, and we need X amount of school. It's easy. We know how many kids there is, right? You take 60,000 refugees, you need X amount of schools. This is a real number. We're not building schools fast enough for what we're taking. So that's a
And housing
reality,
too, right?
and housing too as
Apparently,
well.
like hotels are over, government funded or government paid hotel rooms are
Yeah,
overrun because there's nowhere else to put
yeah,
people.
yeah, exactly. And then, but this could be part of the solutions. And in Quebec, they're trying, at the federal level, they're trying, and different provinces are trying. But we need to fight at every level in the society. And we need to have a conversation about the fact that we might need to loosen the rules about who can do what in a construction site, right? This is a rule that prevent quality is important. So let's invest in making sure that we build, building that will hold and stay strong, etc. But I think we need to have this pushing with professional orders, with professional organizations, or a job trades organization, and make sure that we can give a job, decent income to those people that are here. And let's build more, right? Like, you see the numbers on construction permit, for example. The solutions to this is to build more, but we have a systemic problem where I call it an addictions in Canada. And I spend, we need to remember, I spent 15 years abroad. I've seen other model of society. And it's beautiful. Canada has a great society, a great value systems, but we could be more ambitious and saying, let's build more. This is the solutions. Let's open the valve. Let's. My beautiful best example is Shenzhen in China, right? 40 years ago, there was no city. Go there now. It's a metropolis of 20 million people, right? They just opened the gate and they said to the best and the brightest in this country, if you go to Shenzhen in the 80s, in the 90s, if you go to Shenzhen, there's a future for you. We're building a mega pole there, and go there, and there we're going to build IT and self-driving cars and iPhone and etc. Right? And they did. They did. They built beautiful cities and they built beautiful new products that we're using here in Canada. I think Canada could do that. I always tell people when I was pitching for Canada for all those years, Canada have a big problems. We have a big land, but we have no people. And now we're increasing the amount of people. And if we select the right people, we will be able to keep building. We could be, I still believe in the 100 millions by 2100. I do believe that we have this capacity to have growth and we will be able to build. But we need to remove the hurdle. We cannot have both. We cannot put limitations on building buildings and hoping that we're going to be able to have those people, let the economy roll, let the force of the market roll. We are preventing builders to build more, and then it should, and I know there's a lot of efforts being done, but you need the accommodation for everyone.
Yeah, and maybe more comprehensive planning that spans multiple areas, right? We obviously talk a lot about immigration, but the immigration plan should be in tune with the real estate plan and the healthcare plan. I don't know how much those departments talk, but hopefully now it's more so than ever. So one of the last topics I wanted to cover, Mikael, is the political side. Like, I think part of the problem is that over the last few years, a lot of these changes have just come reactively. And you mentioned this earlier in the show. Like, how can we, maybe as citizens, try to influence more proactive policy making? Because what they've been doing the last 5 to 10 years hasn't worked. I think the core problem is the floodgates were left for as long as citizens were going, yay, immigration. They just left the floodgates open. And now for the first year, as you said earlier, maybe ever in this country, there is so much negative sentiment against immigration. So the government goes, okay, now we close doors. And it's so reactive. How do we get more proactivity? How do we move things forward?
It's a good point that you raise, and it's important that we address it. We have to have a holistic view on all this. You mentioned a few minutes ago, it needs to be addressed with, we're going to build more schools. We're going to build more hospital, and that will benefit everyone. And we will bring the people to build it together with the strategy. And we don't hear that enough. We should be promoting how many carpenters we bring to the country. How many new carpenters we're bringing to the country? How many new plumbers we're bringing to the country? How many more electricians are we capable of bringing to the country? And we need to work with those trade associations to be able to do that. Another point that I found interesting as well is the debate between Quebec and federal, right? On a day like today, the target, etc. And the answer of the federal government right now is very interesting, because if you look at the table, they actually highlighted at the top in gray. We will do higher level of French-speaking people across the country. And we need to look at history a little bit, where we're coming from with this. And I think this is very important that we mention that, is Trudeau father created the notion of a bilingual country. And we know as a Francophone and as a Quebecers that this was an illusion. It never worked. We wanted to have a coast to coast to coast French and English country, and never really happened. And today you have a Quebec province that is French only, which again, playing against them a little bit, I think we need to be proud of our French and be okay with it without limiting other people to come to Quebec. But the answer to the federal government is saying, let's flood the rest of the country with new immigrants. So it's going to be interesting to see if that policy take people from Quebec and send them in other provinces, like Legault been asking. So that could be an answer to that. So instead of keeping the pressure on Quebec Immigration Department, federal is taking some on their shoulder and saying, like, if you go settle elsewhere, we will fast track your applications. I think that's a great solution. And I think that's probably the best news of today. It's allowing more Francophone outside Quebec. Now, again, like I always tell Chinese people, we don't have a family record. We don't have a hukou. This is the document that makes Chinese people between the rural and the city area, right? Like it's been discussed that they limit people to move around the country. We obviously don't have that. Moving it from one province to another one, it's a right of a citizen or a resident of this country. So are we able to take someone from Montreal and move it to Toronto or move it to Manitoba or to Winnipeg? And is this really going to happen, or are they just going to use the systems in Winnipeg or the spot in Winnipeg of French speaking and then never move from Montreal? There will be a little bit of a challenge in the application of this willingness, but I salute the willingness of the federal government to say, hey, listen, Quebec, if you cannot process your case fast enough, we will take more French-speaking people across the board, and we will give emphasis on that. And I salute this big time. I think this is a great initiative. It's probably the good news of the day in terms of like giving focus to the rest of Canada to welcome in the Francophone community. New Brunswick can take a lot. Manitoba have beautiful little pocket of French-speaking people. Ontario have a lot of, Toronto has a great French school system. My friends that just moved from Geneva to Toronto send their kids to French school, and he was telling me how great is the French school network. So we shouldn't be shy of that, and I see the federal government acting on this, and this is a good news, certainly for today.
Great. Well, maybe we'll use the good news as a note to end on, because we've been a little bit critical throughout the episode, but hopefully productively, and it certainly shifted my mentality a little bit on, as you said earlier, solution oriented, right? I haven't been too happy with the last few years, but that doesn't really get us anywhere. So anyways, Mikael, it's been great having you on. This was a great conversation. If anybody out there wants to learn more about you or your law firm, or maybe get in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
Well, obviously, Frontier Immigration website is an easy way to get in touch. A simple reach out with the emails on the websites would make it. On LinkedIn, I like to publish some of the news. It's probably a good way to get in touch with me as well. So Mikael Charette on LinkedIn is available as well. And it gives a perspective on different type of investment and businesses that I do as well.
Awesome. And we will have links to both your website and your LinkedIn profile in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Mikael, thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Josh.